This isn't gonna work well.
It's fun.
If you're thinking about getting into model railroading or you're already an addict, boy, do we have a project for you. In this episode, we finished building this beautiful, awesome wooden scratch-built tunnel portal, and I'll show you how I did it, starting right now. Hey, welcome to It's My Railroad, the how-to show for regular people. On this show, I show you my model railroading tips, tricks, techniques, and tragedies, all while documenting my journey as a regular guy building the model railroad. So if you think you might be into that sort of thing, why not just subscribe? And then don't forget to push that little bell icon so you can catch future videos. Okay, rail fans, we have a ton of work to do to get this tunnel portal done in this episode, and I can't wait to get to it. Actually, I've already done it. I just want to show you what I did. But just before we get over to the makeshift hobby table, I realized during this build that I have made a critical error, a critical omission ever since the very first ever model railroad episode well over a year ago, and that is this. Every time I work on my model, I learn something new, and for me, that's a huge part of the fun of it. So what I'm gonna start doing in this episode is introducing Steve's tip of the week, name subject to change. I don't know, I'm not gonna give any warning, I'll just change it. Anyway, at the end of the video, we'll sort of summarize it with a tip on something we learned. You might already know it, you might not know it, and then in the comments, make sure you add to that tip with your own experiences. It'll be great for the whole community, but blah, blah, blah. Time to get back to work on the model over here at the makeshift hobby table. Hey rail fans, welcome back to the hobby room, to the Brownsmith Railroad, and to the final installment of the wooden tunnel portal project build. Oh, it's so exciting. Today is Friday, April the 12th, and the reason I'm so excited is we're gonna finish this thing today by putting on the final details. By details, what I'm talking about is all these little railroad ties back here are just kind of stacked on top of each other right now, and they're holding up a whole mountain. I just don't think anybody's going to be fooled into thinking that looked anywhere close to real. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the supports in that hold the railroad ties up. We're going to frame around the opening a cool kind of way. And we're going to start by putting the roof of the tunnel in. Now, I understand, my brothers and sisters, you're never going to actually see the roof of the tunnel because it's way back in there. It's small and you got to kind of look, I don't know, x-ray vision to see it. But by doing it the way I'm gonna do it, it brings out a detail in the front that I'm pretty pumped up about. So why don't we just get started on that and I'll sort of show you what I'm doing as we move along. All right, just before we get going, one thing I'd like to point out is this is 50 feet tall, right? And in the story of the Brownsmith Railroad, however, the longest length of timber they could get was 40 feet long, like that. So what we're going to be doing as we get through all of this is we're going to be addressing the fact that this whole structure has got to some kind of way be built from 40-foot maximum lengths of timber. Now it's a little bit of a challenge for them. For us, it's pretty easy. We just cut and glue together wood. It ain't a big deal. So to get started on this thing, I very gently took the wing walls off of the model so that we could concentrate on just the front part of it for right now. I took some measurements of the opening in the front and the depth of the tunnel portal as it goes back into the mountain, set up the chopper, then I went ahead and cut out a whole bunch of pieces that are going to form the roof of the tunnel portal. My measurement said the width of the tunnel was about 20 feet. It's not quite 20 feet, but we'll start with too much and then scale it back to fit into the opening. To do that, I took all these 15-foot long pieces and just put them up against my ruler. Not rocket science. The overall width on the inside of the tunnel portal is 24 feet. So I made me a piece 24 feet. Then I put some carpenter's wood glue on it, just using a toothpick. Stuck it down. You know, throughout the process, I had to get my X-Acto out and sort of nudge things here and there. And the beauty is, since this is like an ancient tunnel portal, it doesn't all have to be perfect. It can be a little squirrely here and there, which is what you're going to see developing as we move forward. since the maximum length timber we have access to is 40 feet. But the structure is 50 feet, we need to figure out a way to splice that together. So what I did is I cut out these 40 footers, these 24 footers, and these 10 footers. And let me show you how we're gonna splice those together to make not only something that's structurally sound, in my opinion, but also gets us all the way up to 50 feet. Put the glue on the 24-foot piece and glue the 10-foot piece to it. And put the 40-foot piece on the end of that. I could have used one length 50 feet long and pretended it was 2, but I think you're gonna see the detail at that joint really adds to the effect that we're trying to get to. Push it down to flatten it all out, wipe off the excess glue with my finger, and boom, there you go. Okay, while those 2 pieces are drying, I decided to test fit the roof of the tunnel portal. It doesn't exactly fit. It's a little too wide. I kind of knew that, and I wanted to make sure it's really tight, so I kind of erred on the side of it being too wide, knowing that I could just take a sanding block and sand it a little bit until we got down to a nice tight fit. I had to be pretty careful with it though, because even though it's glued together, the glue wasn't 100% dry, and it's only little pieces of wood. They're kind of fragile. Dry fit it in there. It's pretty snug, but it goes in. And now you can sort of see how that detail is popping out from the roof of the structure. Now it's time to glue in the uprights, and you can see that the splice piece I have on the front is also going to be supporting the cross beam that ultimately supports the roof of the tunnel. I started out using the super duper high-tech method of grabbing a toothpick and some glue and just gluing it across the face of that timber. Then we need to go ahead and put the glue on the uprights. And I'm going to put all this glue on at one time, and we're using wood glue, which will give us some set time and give us a chance to sort of move things around a little bit to make sure everything lines up exactly the way we want it. You can see how I'm setting this piece down, a little offset from the edge. That's because I really want to make sure we see the detail of those interlocked railroad ties right there on the corner. With all the glue still wet, we take the roof piece and slide it in. And then set it up on top of its upright support. Nudge everything into place. It took quite a bit of nudging and realigning and coaxing to get all the pieces to line up right where I wanted them. And, you know, maybe some people have a different technique to do it, but come the end of the day, this technique worked quite well, and the results were actually what I was after. Isn't that amazing? There's nothing really supporting the roof other than what you see in the front, so I decided to reinforce it by taking, again, some glue and a toothpick and sort of just troweling along the edge, and I know when it dries, it's going to be pretty solid. You know, so far I'm really digging the way this is turning out. It's taking a long time to glue all those pieces together, but it's worth the effort. Unless you buy a kit or something, and I don't even know if they make one, I don't think you're going to get this kind of detail. And at least sitting over on my railroad, I think it's going to look pretty awesome. Problem I discovered, however, is this is supposed to be 50 feet tall, right? These are 50 feet tall, but they turned out to be goalposts. We got goalposts, people. So what I need to do is figure that out. I think instead of cutting those down to be flush, I think we're going to put some cross members in there to finish that up. Have it go a little bit higher, but have like a peak to it. That's where I'm going with that anyway. That's a design on the fly kind of thing. So why don't we go through now and get the cross member in that goes up there. There's going to be another one that goes in there, and then we got some pieces that'll stand up to support this part of the tunnel portal. So let's just get on doing that. All right, so the first thing I had to do was take a measurement between the goalposts on the top, and then I discovered that trapezoidal thing is still there, but whatever. I went ahead and glued the piece in that sits on top of the uprights, and then I decided to go through and put the glue on top of that really cool roof detail that pokes through the tunnel portal, and then I just glued that piece on. And now maybe you can sort of see the detail that I'm after, and just, well, at least how cool I think it looks. Now it's time to glue in the uprights that support all those railroad ties that you see across the face of that tunnel portal. First piece I put in was the middle piece, and you know, it's a 100-year-old tunnel portal, so I didn't actually measure to find dead center. I just kind of eyeballed it and kept shifting it over with my X-Acto knife until I thought it was plumb and roughly in the center of the tunnel portal. Then I went through and put the other two pieces in, and this is how it looks so far. I'm really digging the way this is coming together. And now for the uprights that go on the other side of the railroad ties to support that. I basically did the same thing I did for the ones that are over closer to the entrance. Nothing new to report here. And then I put those remaining members up there across the top. I made them just slightly longer than the width between those two outside uprights, just to give it some flair. But unlike before, I was able to just put glue on all those pieces of wood and then just lay everything in there, kind of coax it around a little bit, eyeball its center, and call it a day. And now it's time to put a little cross bracing in here. It goes from here to here, and from here to here. And I just sort of eyeballed me some pieces, cut 45 degrees on them, and then using my tweezers, just set them in place like that. Just tapped it to make sure it was smooth. And that's how it looks with the two pieces in the front. But you know, it's kind of missing the detail going through the tunnel, so I think I'm gonna go through and take care of that. I glued another support on the roof of the tunnel, the width of the opening, even though you're not gonna see it, just so that I have something to glue some cross bracing to, some diagonal bracing, because from the front of the tunnel portal, you will be able to see those cross braces, and I kind of wanted to make them look clean. All right, look, I got to tell you, I am pretty stoked about the way this is coming out right now. Now, hear me out. I'm just a regular guy. I'm not an artist. I'm not a master model builder. I'm just a dude that had a vision of a tunnel portal in his little pea brain. Boom, made it happen right here. It looks just like how I imagined it. I'm very excited about it. I went through and put some extra details on, though, that the average person's probably not going to see, but I think it would be naked without it. And that is, in here I went through and I put the supports that are holding the railroad ties up inside the tunnel and the cross bracing. We know we need the cross bracing here on the outside, right? But if you're standing back and you look through, I think you would notice that there's no cross bracing on the inside as far as the actual portal goes. I'm going to go through now and put the uprights on the wing walls just like I did here, and then I'll reassemble it. We'll take it over the layout and see how it looks. Doesn't it just look awesome? I think it looks awesome. Anyway, mostly because this is something that was in my head and I didn't really have a design for other than what was in my head. Cut out a bunch of pieces of wood, glued them together, and boom, tunnel portal installed. Since we're at the hobby table, I did a couple of extra treatments to it that we won't go into great detail now, but let me give you the summary of it. First thing I did is I went through and I took some brown chalk paint and I sort of dry brushed across the surface of the tunnel portal. What that does, it gives it more of an earthy kind of look, and it also blends the subtleties of the colors of the weathered railroad ties so that they look like they've sort of weathered together, and yet you can see they're still distinctive. Some are a little bit more, some are a little bit less. I think it really looks cool. I also went through and painted a little bit of black up on top of it to represent where the exhaust has been sort of washing up there over the years. But after dry brushing that brown chalk paint on there, you can see in this image the difference it makes between the unbrushed side on the right there and the brushed side on the left. I think it really looks cool, and it's my railroad, so duh, as long as I like it. One of the other things I did is I went through and put glue on the back of the whole tunnel portal and sprinkled dirt over it. We learned over at the logging camp rehab when we built the log loading ramp that if you put the glue on the back and put it on thick so it kind of gets into all the nooks and crannies, Then you put sifted dirt on that and then blow off the remainder. What you have is dirt kind of seeping through the cracks. As long as you don't go too crazy with blowing it off of there, there's still kind of dust on the tunnel portal. And come the end of the day, this is the look that's achieved. It may not be the look you're after, but it's the look I was after. And again, after 3 episodes of shooting this scratch build, I couldn't be any more happy than I am right now. And now it's time for our new feature, Steve's Tip of the Week, or whatever we're gonna call it. Hey, look, some of you already know this, some of you don't, but let me just share something with you real quick, all right? You know, I built this tunnel portal out of little strips of wood. Now, in theory, all those pieces of wood were exactly the same dimension, right? They were all squares, about 3/32, I think, but don't quote me on that. They were all the same length and everything. So I sanded them a little bit to get rid of the burring. I stained them, and then I weathered them, and then I cut them. Bam, 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 just like that, all in one sitting. And everything was awesome. Here's something I forgot. Here's something maybe you can apply to your arsenal of things you do when you're modeling, and that is this. Wood will respond differently, piece to piece. When you're building a house, it doesn't matter so much. It can change by a bajillimeter, you know, something very small, and you're not gonna know, all right? But if something as small as this model, with those pieces tightly stacked together, what happens is the cumulative effect of all these pieces going together really honks up the precision of the model. So when I'm building one that's 100 years old, it doesn't matter, it can be all squirrely. If you're doing something a little more precise or new, you really need to pay attention to letting everything cure up really good, and then finding the edges that are thicker or thinner, matching up all the wood ahead of time, knowing it's all gonna be precise, and you can start gluing it together. So anyway, the summary tip is this: let your wooden pieces set up and cure completely before you start cutting them. All right, there you go. Hey, listen, this is the kind of stuff we do here on It's My Railroad. So if you're into that kind of thing, again, why not just subscribe? If you liked this video, give me a thumbs up, share it with somebody, for crying out loud. And until next time, thank you so much for being with me here today on It's My Railroad. My name is Steve Brown. Rail on, my friends.